Welcome back, friends, to Emissaries of Renewal. I'm Jessie, and today I'm here with DeDe for a conversation that's both tender and complicated. As always, I want to remind you that we are supported by the Episcopal Evangelism Society, who believe, like we do, that telling the truth about where God's people are living, suffering, and hoping is part of ethical evangelism in the Episcopal Church. Today, we're talking about DeDe's recent trip to the Holy Land as part of a seminary course called Living in Hope. What she saw, what she's still wrestling with, and how this experience is reshaping her vocation and our shared call to renewal. Good morning, DeDe.
Good morning. Good
I'd
morning.
love to start right where this began with you. Why did you go on the trip? Who all did you go with? And how you came to be involved with Living in Hope.
Um, well, as it was something we talked about like our very first day of meeting. I don't know if you remember that, but way back in the day, um, at our first um retreat together, which was part of our orientation, we all talked about all the travel courses that were being offered. And one of them that came up was one of our professors, Eileen's, um, living in hope and going to Israel and Palestine. And some of us were able to go, and some of us aren't. And it has to do with our jobs. And I had always said, well, I think I might go. And then the world kind of changed, and they weren't able to offer the class for a couple of years. But this was the first year in January of 2026 since we had begun that we were able to change. She changed the course a little bit to make it so we could return after a 2017 or not 2017, October 7th, obviously, um, that we could return safely and that they were opening to tourism again. So, uh, one of the things that came up is I said, I don't think I'm going to go. I really was a bit opposed to going, but our professor, Eileen, she said, Denise, I really want you to consider going. I really think you would be good for this trip. Not only would this trip be good for you, but I would like you on this trip. I think it's going to be different. I think it's going to be harder this time around. She had already been a few months earlier to kind of scout and see what it would be like because she knew it would be different than the other trips that she had taken. And she felt that any delegation that went with our school would benefit from my presence. I'm still wrestling with her thought process on that. Um, Another professor that often goes with her, who is our pastoral theology and our CPE professor, Dr. Emily Ott, agreed because she was with her on the trip as well. Said, I think Denise would be really good at doing what you're asking her to do. And she said, I would also, why don't you think about taking out or applying for a SCOM grant, which is a Seminary Council on Mission grant. And you may be extending the trip a little bit and doing some research on generational trauma and pastoral care while you're there, because that is one thing that we're seeing that is lacking. And it's going to be a transferable skill when you come back, because it is one thing that we're going to start seeing in our own context back home, especially when it comes to what's happening with immigration in our country. So we are going to go with our what we started to refer to as our chosen family, because we ended up with a pretty small delegation going. And and she really liked the delegation group that she chose this time. It was the first time she went with the class with the group called Sabeel, which is a Palestinian Christian liberation theology group that is run out of there. And she's like, I think between all of these things that you can do while you're over there, you're going to really, it's not only going to be good for you, it's going to be good for the school, it's going to be good for the church, and it's going to be good for us as the delegation. So after having those conversations and getting the grant, I applied for and received the grant. Um, it um, it became like more than just a travel course for me to go. It became something that an experience that seemed necessary for not only me to go, but to be a part of the church and my diocese, but also for the rest of our delegation, which was again pretty small. There was 5 of us total from Bexley Seabury that went, and that's usually, she said, it was the smallest one that she's ever taken.
Mm.
So we didn't really go there as tourists, or they call them J trips, where you're going, for your Jewish heritage, or you're going for your um, to see Jesus, so you go to the holy sites and you do. It was quite a learning experience for us. Not that we didn't go to holy sites, because we absolutely did, but it was quite different for us.
Yeah. Those are a lot of really good reasons um, to make the choice, which was, it is a very heavy choice. I mean, like you said, in today's international climate, and even the climate when you went on your trip. So then, what did that mean for preparation for you? How did you prepare for this trip? What were some of your thought processes, and how did that, I mean, obviously this is going to affect your life in a big way, even as you prepare to go.
Yeah, it did. It did quite a bit. She recommended that I read um, a book, kind of a biography of someone that she had met when she was there. We went in this January, but in June of 2025, she went over to meet with the new delegation that we were going to be using. And she met with a young girl who just gotten out of prison. She was imprisoned when she was 16 for slapping a soldier that had continuously um, harassed her and her family. Uh, a Palestinian girl slapped a soldier. She went to prison for it, a young girl. And it's called They Call Me a Lioness. We've talked about the book. So she said, why don't you prepare by reading it? And she goes, I'll see if she's available and we can talk with her. Now, I did not get to speak with her. I got to speak with a lot of people, but I did not get to speak with her. Anyway, so one of the things I did to prepare was not only read the book, but it started a book club with a few people at my parish internship site where I'm a seminarian. And we spent time reading that together and talking about some concerns of what we thought, and getting their support. It was a group of wonderful women in in that parish that were quite supportive and were wanting to know, and the church that I'm working at now were very supportive, and they had prayer moments and prayer groups to uplift me, and wanting to know everything that was happening and with me at all times. So I spent a lot of time in prayer and meditation. I spent time with both Eileen as well as Dr. Emlenot to discuss what comes, what might be coming, what I might be seeing, uh, to help me prepare for any kind of role I might have for my, other siblings that would be there. I have, a background history in, caring for others. I was a medical social worker. I've seen crises moments. I've seen some terrible and horrible things. And in case we ran into those things and traumatic things, I knew that it would affect me, but I also knew how to, in that moment, give care first to those around if they needed any sort of, um, you know, if they were, experiencing any kind of trauma moment, I would be able to step in and help them through that, or that type of pastoral care. Um, but we were really there for each other more so than anything. So I felt, having to, that I was able to do a lot of that, internal work for that. And then the other stuff was just, worrying about what I could do to not be a burden to the group. I've spoken briefly on the podcast about things such as the fact that I have a long-term disability and I have an autoimmune disease. So I have rheumatoid arthritis and I have for over 20 years. So I'm doing really, as far as I'm as close to remission, I guess, as one could be, but it comes, to worry. And just 6 months ago, I had major back surgery. So, there's a lot of walking and those things that I was cleared to do. They were happy to say, yeah, yeah, this is something you can do, but know that you needed the surgery because there was a lot of damage done and you're still, having to rebuild all these muscles. So you might be tired, you might be in pain. So I worried about those types of things. And then, of course, the practical things I worried about. So I ended up underpacking because I was afraid to pack too much. And there were silly things that I wasn't prepared for. Like I did not have enough clothes, and I didn't have enough warm clothes. Thinking just layering would be enough to keep me warm, and it wasn't. It wasn't.
Oh no. Were you able to get those things while you were there?
You could have, yeah, but I mustered through with like 3 sweatshirts on at the time. I wish I had gloves. Definitely wish I had gloves and at least a thin coat to go over my 3 layers of sweatshirts that I would wear at any given time because it would cold.
Yeah,
And
I guess
and
I
Wendy,
wouldn't have thought it would be cold in that area of the world either.
no,
Um,
that's I guess that's a mistake a lot of people make because I overheard somebody at the airport um say that. And he wore like thin shirts, like thin camp shirts and shorts. And we're talking 30 degrees cold and
man, yeah.
windy. I'm like, you had to go buy clothes, didn't you? So, but you could have bought clothes if you really were suffering.
Yeah, that's good. So kind of that's kind of a great segue kind of into the geography of it all.
Yeah,
I'm one of those people who needs that map in the back of my Bible.
yeah.
So,
Same.
I'd love to kind of walk through, um, what it was like to land in East Jerusalem, the area of Bethlehem, and maybe some of the more difficult areas to be in and kind of what made those difficult. Just kind of, if you could walk us through the geography of it, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Now, see, I am geographically challenged, so in my mind, I'm not thinking about the size, and also coming from the States, a lot of people who live outside the states don't think about how big the United States are. I mean, you could start driving in the morning in, say, like Texas, and you're still there, you know, 8 hours later, you haven't gone anywhere. Um, so it comes down to we're a massive land, land mass, and Israel and Palestine put together is the size of New Jersey. It's tiny. So we got that lesson. We flew in to Tel Aviv, which is eastern. We stayed in the West Bank, which in a geography lesson, the West Bank is split into three areas. It's area C, B, and A. And then right under A is where Gaza is. Okay. And we stayed in the West Bank, and we did travel out like into Nazareth and Bethlehem. But Tel Aviv is like way over here, but you could be standing on a hilltop on a very clear day in area A, which is, down like southern Palestine, right above Gaza. And you can see Tel Aviv. You can see all the way to the Mediterranean. Look east, it's very clear. And you can also see Gaza if you look south, if you're like on a high enough mountain. And let's just say there's plenty of mountains. I walked them, I complained. My ancestors were embarrassed. I couldn't claim to be a mountain girl much longer. Because that's where most of my complaints came from, I will tell you that. It was because they're steep. They're mountain, they're hill, right? It was the angle. They were steep. I'm mountain goating it, knees to chest, and I'm falling over because I'm still not reaching the incline correctly. So anyway, so I'm standing in area A at a place, and I witnessed the ceasefire, meaning absolutely nothing because they bombed Gaza.
Wait, you witnessed,
Yes, I
you were there
witnessed
at the time of the bombing?
of a bombing. Yeah, I saw the fighter jets go bomb and come back as I'm standing on a hilltop just looking around.
Wow.
And we were at a distance that it didn't affect us. Like, you just kind of felt the sonic boom. But you saw the smoke, you saw, and the people we were with are like, yeah, this happens daily.
Hmm.
And this was right. So this was in, the first couple of weeks of January, or the second to third week of January, we were there. And so there was a ceasefire.
Hmm.
So I think it was like our second day there, but that's how clear your vision there can be as well. So
Was that the first time you had was that the first time you had experienced uh, an act of war like that?
yeah, yes, yes, yeah, it is.
That's wow.
So, and they were just like, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, it kind of felt like an act of war the entire time you were there, because you're watching things like, um just because you don't think of these things like an act of war, but you're watching them do things such as, purposely putting up these types of uh, barriers to wanting to live somewhere. Like they purposely don't pick up their garbage, even though they pay for those services. So there's rubble and there's garbage and there's, you know, in those neighborhoods just piling up and piling up and piling up. Or um, the settlers that overtake the land around them um, will purposely put like guard dogs like on in fences right next to the land and have them bark 24/7 and harass, like those types of things. So
Mm.
there's this constant, harassment of not wanting to stay. Um, but if they leave their land for any reason, they'll just claim it.
Mm.
So there's kind of like that active terror all the
And
time.
what area is this that we're talking about?
This is in the West Bank, anywhere in the West Bank.
Okay. Okay.
That's all it takes is if you leave your property empty at all time. Like we were specifically at a place called Tent of Nations, and it's a property that Palestinian Christians have owned since before the Ottoman Empire. So they've been there a long time, and it's like a farm. And they have to have somebody occupying on that land all the time. Like they can't go to town, they can't leave to go to church. They can't do anything unless somebody is stay. They have to have volunteers stay on the land.
How large is this piece of land?
It's a couple acres. It's pretty large. Because they have like animals and they have like these little cave homes that you can live
Oh,
on, and
wow.
they have structures.
Okay. Is
And
it large enough for them to like have a church on property?
they do have one, but they have their home church is off one. But they have like structures where they do like summer camps and stuff. Like I have a picture of a mural that kids drew inside their cave. We were in that cave where there's a mural where kids have drawn, and it's um, there. What I loved about them is their ideas. They refuse to be victims. We refuse to hate as Christians. So they keep playing, so even though, in the night, like they have an olive tree grove. But they'll sneak onto the properties, like Israelis will sneak onto the property and burn them down, but they'll
Mm.
just replant, you
Mm.
know, and they'll just keep going. Um, but if somebody isn't on the property, so they have volunteers that come and stay there to help out. Like it was a volunteer. Actually, this is kind of a cool story. It was a volunteer that a Methodist minister from the UK came and volunteers there every few, like once a year, and he was there volunteering, and he's the one that gave us the tour around and was showing us things when we saw the bombing. And then we ran back into him the next week at a Bible study um, at the Sabile headquarters.
Hmm.
And we were just like, hey, Eileen and I did, not everybody else was already gone. And we're like, hey, he's like, you guys were at I'm like, hi, John. Like, why are you so familiar looking? So yeah, we ran back into each other. He was a cool guy. Um, but yeah, they're Lutheran Palestinian Christians. Um,
Mm.
and so they were just really laid back, and they just refuse to leave their land. It's actually registered to them, which is which is some of the problems that Palestinians have is during the Ottoman Empire, they were asked to register their land, and that's not a thing there. Like legally, that was a weird thing for them because it was just kind of like a handshake and you owned. It was a given.
Mm.
You bought it, you handshake, and it was you didn't have to legally go and jump through all this paperwork kind of thing. So when that came around, they're like, why do I have to do this? Because my family's owned this land for, hundreds and thousands of years. What are you talking about? And that was one of the ways that by enacting that you need all this, you need this paperwork, you need this, you need that, to show that you own the land. They're like, that's not how we did things. That's not how Palestinians work. It's never how we've worked. And by enacting that, it was one of the ways that they took the land from them.
That
So like,
they took the land from them?
yes, the Israelis were like, well, because you don't have this official paperwork.
But because they had the paperwork, then that's how they were able to keep the Tent of Nations.
Yes,
So in that
because
way, the Ottoman Empire did them a favor. That's that's
yes,
a little interesting.
yeah. So I guess, like somewhere along the line, his family was like, we're going to do this and make sure we have, but they're constantly in court. They're constantly fighting it.
Oh,
We've been in
sure.
court for decades, for hundreds of years at this point, because, it's not the right kind of paperwork, or, it didn't have the stamp, and it didn't have, because it was kind of like, shook a hand and wrote something on a piece of paper, but it's what they did, it's better than nothing. It's not just a handshake, but they at least wrote
Yeah.
something down.
Yeah. Speaking of being in court, can you talk to us a little bit about the dual legal system?
Yeah, what what you see there is Israelis citizens get one kind of legal system, and then Palestinians who aren't citizens have their own. And it's not really full of kind of they don't have the same rights. I mean, it's they live in the same street, they breathe the same air, but they have fundamentally different rules and risks depending on who they are. They can't, what is kind of like what an Israeli can do is like carte blanche. Like they have all the rights and the humanities, that comes with that from, just being human. And then when it comes to being Palestinian, you you don't have free access to the same water, the same healthcare system, to the same um, utilities, to this being free to move anywhere. You can be born in Bethlehem and you're not allowed to go back. You don't have a passport. You don't have the same visas and freedom of movement. You know, you can be arrested for something very random, and an Israeli, citizen would never be considered to be arrested for that. You could be arrested for, going into Israel because you don't have the right to go there, but you have to go there to get your passport, or to get your visa or your birth certificate. They require you to go into, Jerusalem, but you're not allowed in Jerusalem by the nature of who you are when you're born. So you're not allowed to drive a car. You're not allowed to have this type of license. You're not allowed to have this kind of job. You're not allowed to move freely from area A to area B, even though that's all Palestine.
I see.
So it is a double standard. You can't get care at the same hospital.
Now we've talked about Christian Palestinians, and we know there
Yes.
are Muslim Palestinians.
Mhm.
So what is the differentiation in that dualistic existence? Is it is it is it racial? Is it just about, like you said, like where you're born, or because it seems like a very complex consideration.
It it is. You can be Palestinian and be an Israeli citizen. You have to choose that. And then life is easier, but you have to kind of give up the fact that you're Palestinian. Um, and you can't blame anybody actually for doing that. They want you to give up your heritage. They want you to become Israeli. Um, and not acknowledge your heritage of who you are. Um, they don't want Palestine to exist, is my understanding of it. But there'll always be some sort of, I guess, kind of a racial, because I worked with Palestinians that were also Israeli citizens, so that they could live right in, like, by the old city and things like that. And they had the yellow, um, your license plate. They'll tell you if you're an Israeli citizen or not. They have yellow license plates. Um, so so it's easier. Your kids can go to any school, because otherwise, you can't go to any school. Um, but you're still always going to be looked like down at, like you're a Palestinian. So I guess it's like kind of very similar to what our immigrants look like. Their refugee system looks quite different in many ways. If you're of what several generations back was considered a refugee, you'll always be a refugee. That's the law. So even if you have 7 generations of family, they will always be refugees. They can never be anything but a refugee.
I see. Yeah. So
Um,
speaking of identity and um, kind of assumptions and everything. So actually, this is kind of perfect. A coworker and I yesterday were talking about where Jesus calls, I think uh, it calls one of his disciples and tells him, "I saw you sitting under a fig tree." And but before that, we were talking mainly about that. Before that, I can't remember which other disciple comes up to him and he goes, we've found him, we've found the Messiah. It's Jesus of Nazareth. And he goes, can anything good come out of
I'm out of
Nazareth?
Nazareth.
And this is in our holy scripture, right? And
Right.
so I'm wondering, did you have any experience in Nazareth? What was
I
that
did.
like? What did it look like there? Is it still kind of the same situation all these millennium centuries later?
It's Philip and Nathaniel is who you're
Yes,
talking
yes, yes,
about.
yes.
Yeah, and that's the come and see. Um, so yes, we did go to Nazareth. Specifically, took we spent a night in Nazareth. We spent is the day we went to Al Aqsa, which is a whole thing. And then after the morning in Alexa, Philip said, come and go. And so we went and saw. And we stopped at this wonderful little place with that's associated with the sisters there. And it was uh, a place in Nazareth where they are teaching. They do some theater, but it's about teaching the heritage that's still there with the older women in that area of like handwork, like the handiwork, like some of the crocheting and some of the knitting and a type of needlework that's very specific to that area. And they're teaching the younger kids still how to do it. And it's become very popular there. And so it's kind of like a community center. And they're doing it to help them also talk about the generational traumas that is happening. So we spent the afternoon with these wonderful women who got to tell their story. And her and her daughter, and listen to what they do, and look at some of the beautiful works. In fact, I gave Cece a pair of earrings that I don't know if you got to see them when I brought those when we were in Chicago together. But it was like a work of hope through crafts and theater and storytelling. But they worked on trauma and identity because there's only a couple of women that do this special kind of needlework. But what she wanted to do, the idea was to teach them to be proud of being Palestinian, and to rediscover that it's okay to say that because it's getting erased, you know, and to say it with pride and not fear anymore. And I was really impressed with how they did this with, crafts, and they did this in a way that they used language and stories to tell all this, to get this point across. And they have, these large blown up pictures on the wall, and you see these kids, light up working with these older women and learning how to do these little kind of, this needlework that it's like this old fashioned kind of cross stitching, and you've got young boys doing it and young women doing it, and because they're growing up in this kind of violence, and they're getting, but they have smiles on their face, because one of the things that this course is really trying to get across is this ecclesiology of what hope is. That, hope isn't, waiting for the rainbows and unicorns. It's living in hope despite the horrors, despite the fact that there's guns in their face every day. So they don't have the freedom, but they're still living every day like they're free, even though they're not. Nobody stopped that for them. So it was so that was a really bright spot, and they were just wonderful people. And the greatest thing about, they always have snacks and they always have coffee. They always serve great little coffees. So I was like, my parents, when they were there, I say this a lot when I talk about the experience. My parents were there my parents and my aunt and uncle went almost 40 years to the date that I was there. And they always wanted my sister and I to go. It was just me that went. And of course, they had a very different experience than I did 40 years ago. Um, and they went specifically just for the holy sites, but and they weren't embedded like me. But my dad came back practically addicted to their coffee. Like he talked until the day he died about how he loved their coffee. And then I was there like one day and I'm like, I got you, Dad. You know, like, ooh, coffee, coffee. Because I'm not a coffee drinker and I'm not a sweet coffee drinker. But they knew exactly how to put just enough sweetness in there that you're like, yum, 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 you know, and they had it just right. And they had this cold coffee, like, little can that you could just grab and go. And I had it the very first day, and I'm just like, a 12 pack of these, please. I mean, it was so good. It is so good. I was just like, ooh, yeah, I'm a loving this place. So, those were like some of the highlights, like fun moments. But yeah, but they always had some sort of
Nice.
really strong, like, like the mud, little Dixie cups full of coffee for you and little snacks. Like they're just here, 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 here.
Oh,
You know,
I love it.
and
N-
yeah, so the hospitality is wonderful.
Now, you said before the night before Nazareth, you had an unusual experience. Can we go back to that?
Okay, which one was that one? Was it the dying?
I don't know. You had said that it was something interesting in uh where you had unusual access to a certain area.
Oh yeah, the Alexa. Yeah, I
Oh,
went.
there we go. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Where we stayed, we were right. We were to access Al Aqsa, which is a mosque. You go through the Lion's Gate in the old city, and we stayed literally out. Like you could walk to the Lion's Gate, so that's the first place that we stayed. And so it was on one of those hills that absolutely killed me to walk up every time because you couldn't get like a van or anything up there because it's just a really busy street. So if the van could get up there, it was like, we hate this place, we hate this place. But if you were on a bus or anything, they just dropped you off at the bottom and you had to walk up. And I was always like, plus you Episcopalians walk too fast. I've said it before, I'll say it every time. And yes, I'm Episcopalian. You Episcopalians walk too fast. I got little legs. And
Same here, man. I'm still trying to get used to the speed.
the speed is ridiculous. Y'all are just, I got little legs. When you guys are walking, I'm running. And
Hmm.
so I stopped trying to keep up. Anyway, and the incline was like the worst incline for my recovering back. So I usually had to stop when a spasm hit. So, but we were up high enough in a hill that you were practically overseeing. Like we were right by, like we walked by the Mount of Olives to get up there. And then you could see the wall of the old city, and then the golden dome, and then the black dome of the Al-Aqsa. And so that was every night. So we woke up to the call to prayer every morning. So that just became like our alarm clock, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Anyway, so we got unusual because again with Sabine, these are the types of things experiences you get. They know everybody. It was the most hilarious thing in the world that Hannah, who was our main guide, literally knows everybody. He's like Norm from the bar, uh, from Cheers. Um, so you got access to see so many things, but we did get an unusual access to the caretaker of Alexa did our tour, and we were able to go in and see everything. We went to the caverns. We, um, went into the archives of it. We saw, and he talked with us. And he's actually somebody who is also a freedom activist. Um, so, he travels a lot, um, even into the States. He's well known in the States, by our government to, do to help with freedom talks and those types of things. So we go in and you have to wear a skirt to cover your legs, and you have to cover your head. I covered my head most of the time anyway because my aunt and my mom had asked me to, even though you don't have to cover your head. They said just if you do go, and my parents and my aunt are gone, so I wasn't going to defy them. 40 years ago, they said if you girls go, please cover your head. I never knew why they asked me that. I really never understood it, but I was going to listen to them. And then I realized I think it has to do with the fact that it's really windy there, and you just end up having a rat's nest head, of hair. So I covered my hair the entire time I was there. Anyway, so covered your head, you put like this green skirt on, and you go in, and we got like an all access tour. There are cats in there, and there are birds in there. It was just gorgeous. It was absolutely beautiful. Well, El Aqsa sits on the holiest of holies. It sits where the temple used to sit. It was built on top of it. They don't know exactly where the holiest of holies was. So they can't pinpoint it, but it sits on top of it. So that's why Israeli authorities do not allow, um, it's against the law for Jews to go there. Um, no Palestinian or no Muslim would care. They're welcome to go there, but it's against the law for them because they can't know where it stands. So they can't avoid it. But we don't care. We'll walk on it, as Christians. So we got to spend time in there, and then we have they have caverns, oh Marwani, and which are the tunnels, and that has like a black dome behind it. Um, he was a very our guide. He was a very like skeptical and blunt. Um, he kind of felt like by digging all of it up, like, all the excavation that they do, they're just trying to prove that they belong. And he's like, why? I'm a human being. I belong wherever I belong, kind of thing. So he wasn't, he didn't quite understand why that's such a hard concept. That's kind of where he always came from with it. Um, but he went on with it, and he was very generous, and he was very kind. Everybody there that we spoke to spoke often of Jesus, and that even pointed to places that supposedly they believe Jesus was in those areas. This traditionally that is believed this is where Jesus. They pointed to this one place they were very excited to show us. This is where Jesus went and hid or was teaching when he was 12. When he was in the temple and he scared his parents. This is the room. This is where he was. He was at the temple. And they were all like, come, you have to come see this, because you're a Christian. They're like, come, you have to go see this. They all were very excited to show it. So many people were like, did you go? Did you go? So they were very welcoming. And the only people who got frustrated with us, there was a lot of people weren't listening and taking their shoes off in the right place because they just put the carpet in. That was their only concern. It wasn't about anything else. We just put that carpet in. Um, but and it was raining. So we went there, and then, yeah, we went to Nazareth. And while we were in Nazareth, we also went to the church or the synagogue where he preached, where he talks about where he's the law of Moses, um, where he is, those are his words. And they chase him to the Mount Precipice. And then I stood atop Mount Precipice.
Wow.
And again, and then again, because yeah, standing in the church was pretty big deal. This little kind of underground synagogue. And then man, they chased him. He must have run fast because it was a distance. Um,
Jesus was fit.
he was fit. He was. I'm like, man, they chased you. You're better man than I was. Um, you did leg day. Because we also, Sammy, little Sammy, she's like, dang, he could run. Um, and so we stood on top of there, and when you stand on top of there, you could see Mount Tabor. The traditional site of the Transfiguration. Like you could see it clearly because it's only about you're looking right across the Jezreel Valley, and um, you could see right across there, and it's about maybe 6 miles, and you could see Tabor very, very, very clearly.
Yeah.
Um,
Of
so
so many people of faith, so much of our history is in this to us Americans small space. And that's amazing. And it's amazing that we have such a connection to such a small space so far away. Still today in 2026. So this amazing experience, obviously, you didn't just check the box and get off the plane here at home and say, wow, that was cool. What's for dinner? So can you explain in your own evangelism, in your own context, kind of how you brought that back in both good and bad ways, if there is, any struggles still within you,
oh no.
any emotions that you're dealing with, and how, in your own parish you brought that home with you.
Yeah, actually had a big conversation about this last night. I was in discernment with my spiritual mentor and sending priest and LD, and he he's like, tell me how you're doing, what's going on. And I said, I'm forever changed. And he's been, it was 30 years ago. And I said, I know you've been. And he goes, yeah, you can't go and not be unchanged. And I said, I mean, and I and I told him, I said, it's probably a little different than what you experienced. And he's like, oh, I'm sure it is now. And and I said, and I'm still having a hard time putting it all into words. And evidenced by the fact that, this one project that I'm supposed to be doing for, I'm putting, writing this formation about it, I still haven't done. And I have to have it done by tomorrow because this is when I'm teaching. Um, I've got it like a quarter of the way done. Because I don't always know how to talk about it as well. When it comes to, the facts of it, I can. But I'm still processing a lot of it. And I think I will be for a long time because I am forever changed. How I witness, um, I think how I'm going to be a minister, how I'm going to practice my ministry. It's so much happened. There were moments of beauty and joy, and then there were moments of absolute terror. Um, and pure exhaustion, and sometimes all you witnessed was cruelty. You can't go there and deny what you saw. You can't unsee it. And you can turn a blind eye to it. You can live in your bias because you've written a narrative from a perspective that you've read about. But when the reality of it, you're facing the reality of it and you still deny it, that's just rationalizing something, because it's there, it's in your face 24/7 while you're there. So still a lot of processing. I'm still not sleeping great, because I think about them every day. I think about the people that I saw and I talked with, the absolutely genuine heartbreak of some of the things that they've been through. And the connection of the fact that everyone had a similar story. Even just random people I met in the old city, some of it was curated that I got to talk to them, and then half of it wasn't, because we just ran into them, because that's how we spent my research days. We were going to curate people to talk to, and then it just ended up being Spirit just kind of led us to, I think you just want to randomly meet people, because it ended up being that way. We were just walking around and they were led to us. And the stories didn't change. That,
Yeah.
the generational trauma, that, the fear. And the hope despite, I mean, I really learned what an ecclesiology of hope looked like.
Amen. Well, DeDe, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. Um, we'll go ahead now at this time and move to our scripture and reflection portion of the show. And DeDe picked out for us today Romans 5:3-5. And not only that, but we also boast in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not disappoint us, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. So to me, this piece of scripture is kind of a perfect example of the commitment and the hospitality that you spoke of in Palestine for the people there, who it's very clear they're not manufacturing hope. They're living it as a choice to endure, to continue on, and to make sure that their heritage and their people um, remain in the world, and are also very welcoming to the stranger, as all three of our faiths understand and want to express. So to me, that's kind of living the hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Living in hope after this trip really taught me, because I didn't exactly know what she was going for in naming this living in hope. And it really means honoring that endurance of the communities we met, the tent of nations, the Bedouin families that I met, which were several, the healers that I talked about in Nazareth, and letting that practice hope shape, our own small communities that we can bring back here. Trusting the Spirit is already at work in the places, places in their rubble, in my own fragile body at times, and our, or in anybody's fragile bodies, and how we can join the work without pretending. We don't have to be anybody's hero. We can just be there for, one another. And with that kind of radical hospitality and everyday evangelism.
Yeah. So at the time of this taping, things have gotten even more complicated in the Middle East, um, to include the involvement of our own country. And there's a lot of um, unknown. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of exhaustion in a lot of people's hearts and minds. So if someone is listening right now, DeDe, that might be kind of feeling those things, what first steps do you think they should take in addressing this in their own way?
I think don't be shy about addressing it. Number one, um, speak out. What they need are our voices. They need our witness. And if this is something that you don't want or to be a part of, to be associated with, say it. Don't be afraid, because it's what is needed. We need to speak out about it, even if it's scary. Do the unbiased thing and really look into what's happening. Don't listen to just one side. Listen to the voices of the people that are the ones that are being harmed by this. And talk to your local constituents, talk to your representatives. Find a community that will help you talk to people and advocate for them here. Because we have a larger voice. That's one thing that I was really shown. We have a larger voice in this piece than as in the United States than we think we do. Because we do a lot more behind the scenes than a lot of people think we do. You can't be passive about this. So, but if all else fails, pray, ask God to guide you on this. And to remember that this is not biblical. Don't fall for it. You shared it with me last night. Um, uh, this is this is we get when we go to our church and we get community, we hear teaching and theology, maybe 1-2 hours a week, but then we spend time on social media and we're bombarded with all sorts of voices for 14 hours plus a week. And it doesn't mean it's the right theology. It doesn't mean it's the right voice. It doesn't mean it's God's voice. So be careful when you cultivate that in your algorithm of who you're listening to. Because right now, anybody can say anything, and oftentimes it's not biblical. It's not, it's voices that are talking opinions or what they think is right. It doesn't mean it's the educated right way to look at why God wrote that, or why the Bible says that. So be careful of that. Just be cautious and know if it lands on the side of God, that's the right one.
Yes, yeah. And that requires, like you said, a lot of prayer.
A lot of
Absolutely.
prayer, lots of discernment. So, just be careful with that. So,
Yeah. Friends and siblings, if you're listening and carrying your own mix of grief, anger, or confusion about the Holy Land, you're not alone. Our invitation isn't to solve it, but to live in hope the way Romans describes it, letting God's love poured into our hearts move us toward endurance, character, and a hope that doesn't disappoint. May you find small, faithful practices of solidarity where you are, prayer, learning, giving, and telling the truth. And may the Spirit show you how your story is bound up with the story of those who are living in hope under occupation. Until next time, go in peace and keep watching for the quiet places where renewal is already breaking through. Take care, everyone.
blessings.